In the 2010s, more than 15 million people did something that sounds insane. They spat into a plastic tube, sealed it in a box, and mailed their entire genetic code to a startup in California. In return, 23andMe told them where their ancestors came from, which relatives they never knew about, and whether their DNA carried the markers for certain diseases. It felt like magic, and for a while it made the company worth $6 billion. But here is the problem with collecting the most personal data a human being has. A leaked password can be changed, a stolen credit card can be cancelled, your genome cannot. It is the one thing you can never reissue. And in October 2023, hackers walked out of 23andMe with the genetic and family data of nearly 7 million people. 18 months later, the company was bankrupt, and the DNA of 15 million customers was sitting on an auction block as just another asset to be sold to the highest bidder. The pitch was genuinely beautiful. For about $99, you could finally know yourself, all the way down to the molecule. 23andMe, launched in 2006, survived an early fight with the FDA over its health reports, and by the late 2010s it was a cultural phenomenon. The kits were a holiday gift. Celebrities took them on camera. In 2021, the company went public through a deal backed by Richard Branson, and its valuation touched $6 billion. On paper, 23andMe had won. It had a household name, a beloved product, and a database of human DNA larger than almost anything in private hands. The trouble was hiding in plain sight, and it was a question nobody on stage wanted to answer out loud. Once someone has spat in the tube, what exactly do you sell them next? Here is the part most people never understood. 23andMe was never really in the business of selling DNA kits. The kit was the bait. The real prize was the database, 15 million genomes voluntarily handed over, each one tagged with surveys about health, habits, and family history. That is one of the most valuable scientific resources on Earth, and the plan was to rent access to it. In 2018, the pharmaceutical giant GSK paid $300 million for an exclusive deal to mine that database for new drug targets. This was the dream that justified the valuation. 23andMe was not a spit kit company. It was going to be a drug discovery engine powered by the genetic data of millions. And to feed it, the company built features designed to make the database grow itself. The most important one was called DNA Relatives, opt-in, and 23andMe would connect you with people who shared your DNA, showing you cousins you never knew you had. It was brilliant for growth. Remember that feature. It comes back. The drug discovery dream had one brutal flaw, and it was the same flaw that kills 100 startups a year. There was no recurring revenue. When you buy a DNA kit, you buy it once. You do not spit in a tube every month. So the moment growth slowed and everyone curious had already taken the test, sales fell off a cliff, and there was nothing underneath to catch the company. Meanwhile, the thing that was supposed to save it, drug development, is the slowest and most expensive business in the entire economy. A single drug can take more than a decade and billions of dollars to bring to market. 23andMe was trying to fund a marathon with the cash from a one-time sale. And the GSK partnership, the proof that the data was gold, quietly fizzled. By 2023, the exclusive deal had ended with no blockbuster drug, downgraded to a modest $20 million license. The company had spent years losing money and burning through cash, with its rescue plan still theoretical. It needed time and trust to make the database pay off. It was about to lose both in a single week. In October 2023, 23andMe disclosed that attackers had gotten in. The technical part matters because the company's own product turned a small break-in into a catastrophe. The hackers did not crack 23andMe's servers. They used a technique called credential stuffing. People reuse passwords, so the attackers took username and password pairs leaked from totally unrelated websites and simply tried them on 23andMe's login page. Enough people had recycled an old password that the attackers walked straight into about 14,000 accounts. On its own, 14,000 accounts out of 14 million is a contained problem, well under 1%. But now, remember DNA Relatives. Each of those 14,000 compromised accounts was a doorway into the shared profiles of all their genetic matches. The attackers harvested those networks, and roughly 14,000 break-ins exploded into the exposed data of nearly 7 million people. The very feature built to make the database grow virally was the same feature that let stolen data spread virally. And the door was unlocked because 23andMe did not require two-factor authentication and did not catch a stranger trying thousands of logins in a row. After the breach, trust evaporated, and trust was the entire business. In September 2024, in an almost unheard-of move, every single independent member of 23andMe's board resigned at once, breaking publicly with the chief executive over the future of the company. The stock, once worth $6 billion, had lost more than 99% of its value and was facing removal from the Nasdaq. Layoffs cut deep. There was no recurring revenue to fall back on, no blockbuster drug to point to, and now a brand defined in the headlines by a massive genetic data breach. In March 2025, 23andMe filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The pioneer of consumer DNA testing, a company that had been worth billions, was insolvent. And this is where the story becomes genuinely unsettling. In bankruptcy, a company's assets get sold to pay its debts. 23andMe's single most valuable asset was the genetic data of 15 million people. So your DNA, the most personal information that exists, was now legally just inventory, to be auctioned to whoever bid the most. More than 24 state attorneys general sued to stop it, arguing that genetic data is not a used office chair and cannot simply be sold off in a fire sale. The auction was reopened. In the end, the database was sold for $305 million to a non-profit founded by 23andMe's own co-founder, which promised to honor the existing privacy rules. But the precedent had already been set in the open for everyone to see. When you hand your genome to a private company, its survival is the only thing standing between your DNA and the auction block. It is easy to blame the breach or the bad business model. But the deeper failure is more interesting, and it is specific to what 23andMe was. The company's single greatest asset and its single greatest liability were the exact same thing, that database. It was the only thing that could ever make 23andMe valuable, and it was the only thing that could destroy it. Every decision that made the data more useful made it more dangerous. DNA relatives made the database grow and made the breach spread. Collecting more genomes raised the valuation and raised the stakes of a leak. The company was sitting on a pile of nitroglycerin and calling it an oil reserve. And underneath that was a money problem it never solved. 23andMe was funding a 10-year drug discovery dream with the proceeds of a product you buy exactly once, while holding data that became radioactive. The instant security failed. It needed time to turn DNA into medicine. The breach destroyed the trust that would have bought it that time. It did not die because the science was fake. It died because it could never afford the future it was selling, and it gambled the one thing its customers could never get back to try. 23andMe promised to revolutionize medicine with data and collapsed under the weight of the very thing it collected. It is not the only health startup that turned a beautiful biotech promise into a multi-billion-dollar disaster. Another one convinced the world it could run hundreds of tests on a single drop of blood, raised $9 billion, and the technology never actually worked. That story is on the channel right now, and the link is on screen.